Here I'm going to solve this quadratic equation, and I'm going to do so by using factoring. And I notice that all of my terms are on one side of the equation and they're equaling 0. So I'm going to go ahead and look to factor this quadratic expression. And I'm going to start by looking to see if I can pull out a greatest common factor, which it looks like I can pull out a negative because my leading coefficient is negative, and also a 4 since all of my terms are divisible by 4. So I'm going to go ahead and have x squared minus x minus 2 left over. So I'm going to factor what's left in here. My leading coefficient is 1 for this quadratic. So I know I'm going to use kind of the easy method where I'm asking myself what two numbers multiply to make negative 2 that add to make negative 1. So it'll be 1 and 2. Where because of this negative I multiplied to make a negative, I know I'll have one of them positive and one of them negative. And since this is negative, I know the larger of the two will be negative. So I have negative 4 times the quantity x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 2, and that equals 0. So if I have some factors here, and when I multiply them all together I get 0, then at least one of them is going to be 0. So I'm going to count for all possibilities. I'm going to set each one of my factors equal to 0. Something interesting worth noting is that negative 4 equals 0 is a false statement. There is no variable here, and it will not yield any solutions. So if a greatest common factor is simply a number, then you can ignore it. But if the greatest common factor is going to include a variable, then you will have to include it, and it will end up being 0. And we'll take a look at that in another example. Let's go ahead and look at these other two. We have x equals negative 1 and x equals positive 2. So I'm going to write x equals negative 1 or 2. So these are the two solutions of this quadratic equation.